Hello everyone, and welcome to our first lesson for the Mackintosh Master Copy. And today we're going to be mixing colors and applying our first layer. And we're going to take it step by step, and that's going to include a little bit of pencil work. Okay, so make sure you have your paints ready, and also a sharp HB pencil. You'll also need a kneaded eraser, and you're going to need your gouache. Okay, so we're going to get started right away, and I'm going to have my reference image nearby. Here I have my drawing already on the paper, and I'm going to find something to put underneath here. There, so that I think shows us the entire painting on camera. I lose my strips there, but that's okay. So here's everything, all right? And the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to lighten up this area of graphite, or any area of graphite on your drawing that is a little bit too dark. And so for me, I'm just going to form my kneaded eraser here. That's just this area right in here, and I'm just going to use light taps to lift up any extra graphite so it doesn't mix in with our paint too much. We want the graphite lines to show because they're actually part of the drawing, part of the painting, right? But I don't want so much that they muddy things. So I'm removing sort of the extra graphite anywhere that I see it. And you can tell because you get really dark areas, right? That's pretty good. So what I can do then is I can take a light brush and just sort of brush over my drawing to make sure there's nothing extra, okay? The next thing I'm going to do is put a piece of tape around this. And that's just going to keep us on target with our size. And so I'm going to put a piece of tape over the pencil lines that I drew, showing me sort of where the edges are. And we're not going to be putting a background on this, but it does help us to kind of keep the boundaries of our painting clean. Because there are some areas that we just go right off the paper, like right here. And it's just something I like to do. If you choose not to, that's also fine. But I do like to do that. Just putting tape all the way around it. And it just gives me a boundary. Oh, that's the end of that one. The thing with this tape, it's this piece is going to be a little thinner. I need to get another supply of washi. I'm running low. I use it all the time. There. So that's my boundary, okay? Okay, so if we look at the reference image, which I'm going to put right here, I'm going to do this sort of systematically by color group in a way, okay? So we've got a few color groups going on. We've got the green, the gray-green of the stems, okay? We've got this sort of muted mauve-y pink in these areas, all right? We've got this beautiful cornflower blue in here and here, all right? And a little bit detail touches later for that. That'll be more like the second step. This green is a little bit more of a teal than this green, but we could just add a little bit to that to make that happen. And then we have the yellows, okay? And we also have the grays, okay? The grays of the lilies and of the daffodils, all right? So we need to do those too. And I think we're gonna start with the grays, okay? So if I look at the gray here, I'm gonna start with this gray and this lily. And it's sort of a warm gray. okay? And this is toned paper, all right? But we're gonna be doing it on white. So wherever you see this color, for us it's white, okay? So these lilies are actually very white with the outline of pencil, but they have a little bit of warm gray and cool gray to sort of define them. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and put that down first. There's also a little bit of gouache mixed in here with some cornflower blue, which we'll put on when we do the blue sections. So let's go ahead and mix up a gray. And I have my palette here. And what I'm gonna do is I am gonna put down some gouache on my palette. I'm gonna put it off to the side, all right, so it doesn't get involved with the mixes that I make, but so I can just dab into it when necessary. Okay, and then my paints are in a little palette like this. So we got to think about what colors that we're going to use to make gray. And I'm going to use the warm blue. So let me grab my paintbrush. Just use this one. And I'm gonna take some warm blue, so French ultramarine, which I have to find because I think it's that one. My blues are, nope, that's more of a violet. I think some violet got into my blue. I think that's the problem. So let me just clean this up. All right, let me try this again. The blues are so dark when they dry. Nope. It's got to be this one with just violet in it. Sorry. So weird. Okay, so this is it. It's just, for some reason, the violet got mixed into my ultramarine. I don't want that. I'm trying to clean it up. Okay. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and put some blue down on my palette. Some warm blue. And then I'm not going to show you my palette all the time, but I'm going to show you my plate because this is important. So I've got some warm blue down, okay? And then I'm going to use some of my burnt sienna, okay? Because warm blue and burnt sienna will make lovely grays. And I'm just going to keep adding burnt sienna until I get a warmer gray. And then I'm going to add a tiny bit of warm yellow to that, just a little tiny bit to warm it up even more. A little bit more. So I'm looking for that warm gray color, and I don't need very much of it. So if I swatch that out a little bit, it's sort of like that. And I'm going to hold my reference up next to it. And that's pretty darn close. So I'm going to stick with that warm gray. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to mix a warm gray that's similar to this one in this flower. Okay, so blue and orange with a little bit of warm yellow. And then I'm going to take my brush full of this warm gray, roll it to a point, and I'm going to use my reference, okay, right next to this flower here. And I'm going to see that it comes at a crisp line right to here, and then it sort of comes down. There's white on top, but I don't need to worry about that right now because put it down where I see it. Okay, and then I'm going to rinse my brush, and I'm going to soften all of the edges around with just a clean, damp brush. So I rinsed my brush, and I dried it off, rolled it to a point, and I'm just softening that gray. And then I can pick up more gray, and I can just sort of drop it in around the edge where it's crisp, okay, just to give it some depth. But I really want to be sure that these edges are soft. You see where they sort of just disappear? So I can just sort of blend a little bit to give it some of that hollow look, okay? Now, the rest of the grays in my lilies are a cooler gray, all right? So what I can do is I can add more blue to my gray. So I just take a little bit of blue, and I might have to add some more burnt sienna to it. A little bit more blue. So I just keep adding until I get to the point that I have a blue, a gray that's cooler. Okay, so that's the cooler gray that I'm looking for. And if I put it right next to the warm gray, you can see what I mean. Okay, so you've got warm gray and cool gray. There's a big difference, all right? And now I'm going to use this very, very pale. First, I'm going to go back here because as this is drying, my edges are hardening up again, and I really want to soften those. We're going to put, if I need to, I can push up into it with the tissue or my finger. I really want it to be soft. Now, we're going to go ahead and work on this one first, and I'm just going to put the lightest touch, all right, of cool gray on this side of the flower and on this petal here. So really, really pale. Lots of water on my brush with a little bit of paint. And I'm going to start here at the edge of this petal. And pull it down. And then also on this petal underneath. So I'm just filling in, right? Then I can take a clean, dried off brush, and I can just soften it over into this area so I get a little bit of that color over here. But these are really going to be white, and we're going to add white gouache to those later. All right, so that gives this flower a little bit of depth. This petal back here, all right, is light, so we're not going to touch that one. And we're going to do the same thing to this one. So I'm going to grab my light, cool gray, and then I'm going to go on this lily. I'm painting underneath here. All the way down to those leaves, okay? And I'm leaving the light spaces light, so you've got to really pay attention to that reference image, all right? Our drawings can get confusing. We have to take it sort of one petal at a time, one section of the plant at a time. And then it's also dark over here. Darker, I shouldn't say dark because it isn't dark. All right, so that just took it a little bit darker with the cool gray to sort of give us the effect that that petal, that flower is a little bit in shadow. Okay, now this lily up here has no gray on it at all, either does this blossom here. All right, so those we'll leave alone for now. All right, so let's look over at the daffodils. The daffodils also have some gray in them on the petals, and they're a cool gray. So we're gonna do the same thing, and we're gonna put white gouache on top later, but right now we're gonna stick with that same cool gray. Let me just, I'm gonna put this under here so you can see it better. So I'll start with this flower up here, and I am gonna go ahead and just put some of this cool gray on this petal. And we're gonna, again, we're gonna use this one here is definitely darker. Those two are very light, so we're gonna leave those alone. All right, then moving down to this one, I've got gray on either side. And then there's gonna be yellow and white gouache in the middle there, okay? Just a little bit. And then on this one, we can safely paint that whole thing gray because everything else will be on top of the white gouache. We're making a map, we're filling in, so we don't have to worry about losing our pencil lines. This one, I'm just gonna paint center, all right? Moving to this one, and notice how when I put the paint down, I'm not just going back and forth. I'm putting the paint down in the direction that I see it. And then this one, leave the paper blank where it's yellow. All right, so that one now has some shading in it. And then this one, so this, this petal, we're gonna paint around that stamen, and we're just gonna put a little bit of gray over on this side, painting around that stamen, kind of whipping it down here. And then this one, same thing, under that stamen. Putting a little bit of gray in there. This one the same. So we don't want to paint where we've got yellow or just like a really, really clear white if we don't have to. If we do, it's fine. We can always paint over it. But we're getting this gray base down to give us sort of a shadow look. All right. We're going to be painting over that. So I'm just following along on each of these petals. Going one after the other and putting some cool gray down where I see it. And if it's going to get, the color's going to change over time. Right now we're just sort of setting the groundwork here. Okay. Okay, so I think that's it for our cool gray. All right. So typically what we want to do when we're putting these washes down is we don't want to paint something right next to where we just put something wet. Okay, so we're going to move like to another area of the painting. So I think what we'll do next is I think we're going to work on the green bits. Okay, so we're going to mix up this sort of sagey green, and we can leave our cool gray right on the palette because that gives us color harmony and it's not such a different color. And we're gonna start with a cool blue. So just a tiny bit of our phthalo. Okay, and we don't wanna go too dark, but dark enough where we can lighten it up a bit. Remember, this is our first layer, okay? And then we're gonna mix in a little bit of burnt sienna, just like we did with the warm blue, until we start to get a more muted gray-green. About like that. All right, so let's see what this color looks like if I put it down. And then I'll add a little bit of water to it. See what it looks like lighter. All right, so that was a cool blue, so phthalo blue with a little bit of burnt sienna. And I think we're fairly close there, right? There are areas where we're gonna put color glazes on later, but I think for our general tone for these stem areas, we're pretty good. When we get up into this area, we're gonna add a little blue back in. So let's use that mix. And then what we're gonna do is paint in all of the stem areas that we see and make a map for ourselves, just like we always do. This is no different than any other project. We're making a map. Okay, so I'm gonna lighten it up just a little bit. Grab some on my brush. And I'll start, and I'm probably gonna move my drawing around a lot, but I'm gonna start up here in this area. And this is really fine work, okay? So I'm just painting in the green. And look, the green starts to wrap around the little red area. So where I see that, and I'm trying really hard not to smudge the graphite under my hand. So I'm not letting my hand move around. I'm keeping it pretty steady. If you feel like you have a problem doing that, you could always put a piece of tracing paper under your hand. And the other thing is that you can also move to a finer brush, like a size 2 or a size 1, if you feel like you have more control. So I'm painting in this green, and once I have some down, if I notice that I need to be a little bit darker, then I can add another layer on top. This is so tiny and small that it's not going to matter. You're not going to get streaking or anything if you add another layer. I'm using the tip of my brush. And I'm just coloring in the areas where I see that lovely green. Now the reason I started on the top right is because I'm left-handed, all right? When you actually go through and do this, if you're right-handed, you might start on this side, okay? Or you just have to be really careful about smudging wet paint, all right? So that's that part. Now I'm gonna move down and I'm gonna paint these stems in here behind the daffodils. So same plan, and remember, this is the first layer, so if we need to make some adjustments with color glazes and things like that, we can do that later, but we're just putting in this tone of green to make ourselves a map and to get paint on all of these layers, because what that does is it safeguards our drawing. So if we don't pick it up for a while, our drawing is going to be okay. All right, then there's another one back in here. So I'm going to do the same thing. Tip of my brush. Painting in the green. So again, you have to really pay attention to your reference. These drawings can be fairly tricky, right, to keep track of when they're really complicated like this. All right, now I'm going to move to this area in here. So I see here, it just comes right off the bottom of this sort of clover-like shape. And then it comes down behind that dangly little lily. Okay, so my cat Sam knocked over a glass while I was filming there and broke it. So I had to stop. So I'm back to green. I had just finished this part right here, this part. All right, so we're gonna continue on. So up here, we see some of these green bits, all right? Some of them are a little bit more blue, green, whatever, but we're gonna paint them with this color for now, okay? So I'm gonna start in here with this little bit of green on this lily bud. Go ahead and get that in. It's really about the perfect color, but okay. And it comes down here. There's a couple things going on. So there's another leaf over on this side that we're going to paint in. And again, this is when we have to be really paying attention to our reference image, okay? And then it splits down into one that's sort of in the background. So we're going to paint that one first. And it goes behind here and then picks up again down here. Okay. And then we're going to follow it down here and paint that in. And again, we're using the tip of our brush to put in this green. And you'll notice that like these stems are lighter on one side and darker on the other. The darker piece we're going to put in later. Let's go ahead and add in this second one right next to it. And you'll notice that it kind of skips a minute and then goes down into here behind these petals. Okay. And then let's follow it down, and we want to go ahead and paint these petals on this unopened lily. All those details that we see are going to come at a later time. Right now, we're just making our map. Okay. And it comes over on this side. Sorry, I was out of camera, and I'm trying really hard not to do that, but and then one that comes on this side. And notice that I'm painting each leaf or sepal separately, even though they're all kind of one green, okay? All right, so now that that's done, let me just grab some more paint and we're gonna go ahead and paint this larger stem. Tip of my brush to get those really good shapes defined right from the get-go. Then it stops at this petal and then it picks up again underneath it. Coming down. Notice that I'm being very careful, right? I'm using the tip of my brush and I'm painting in direction of form. Then it stops here, and they kind of have a differentiation in color that we will address at another time by putting a glaze on top. But for now, we're going to separate, leave just a tiny bit of space in between. Bring it all the way down. And you see that it's a yellower green, but we will add a glaze on top at a later time. Grab a little bit more paint. Now these other areas are a lot paler, so I'm just going to add a little bit of water to my brush. So these few little stems here that are sort of in the background are going to be a little bit lighter. See how that one goes in there. And then it's joining down here, and then I've got two on this side. Just pay close attention here because it's really possible to paint the wrong area. Okay. All right, now we got to look around. Now we're going to go back up into this area. All right. Let me see if there's, oh, there's a few more places that we need to paint with this green. So grab some more of our green. We've got a little bit here. And then we've got, the majority of this is that cornflower blue. But there's a couple spaces in here where you see a little bit of that green stem. Not too much, but there is a little bit. So we just want to make sure that's in there. I just keep grabbing more paint and I'm looking and looking. And if I follow it down, there's a couple spaces where I've got some of that green. It comes right down here. Okay. All right. And I'm going to keep looking. All right. I see some more on this lily. So we've got this stamen, or yeah, it's green. And then we've got a few sepals here, little bits of green. Bring this down. And then we're back to this area, okay? Now, if you notice that the rest of these have a little bit more of a bluish cast, so I'm going to pick up some of my blue and add it into that green, just a teeny little bit. So I'm picking up some blue. I'm adding it into that green and really mixing it in so it becomes more of a bluish green, okay? And it's fairly pale. So, and then it even becomes purple over here, but right now we're just going to focus on these, and I'm going to go ahead and paint in this one to make it a little bit different from the others, because it is. Bringing it right down to that petal. Okay, and then before we can go ahead and do this one that's coming up. So I'm just going to paint the whole thing, and we can put some white gouache on top of it. All right, and then I'm going to turn this so it's a little easier for me to paint. And I'm going to go ahead and put in these here. All right, so let me grab some of that bluish color. We'll go ahead and paint this one. I'm always looking at my reference to see where it ends up. And remember, if it's a little lighter or a little darker or a little bit of a different hue, we can change that with our gouache when we come in, and other watercolor when we come in for our details on the next layer. Okay, and then this one comes in here. That one. And then we've got this one here. So I'm going to turn this way. And paint this one. What was that little bit doing there? That's darker blue, so we can go ahead and paint that. Sometimes when things shift, I leave a little tiny space in between. I think that's good. And then this kind of comes behind here. Okay. All right, let me turn this back around now. Let's see where we are. See, it can be tricky, so you really have to pay attention. All right, what don't I have? I think we're pretty good for that green and bluish green. So now we're going to go ahead and do this color here, for which I'm going to add in a little bit more of that cool blue. So let me show you my palette. So I'm going to put in a little bit more of the cool blue. And I think just a very small touch of warm yellow, just a little bit. And let's see what happens with this color. I think a little bit more of the cool blue and a little bit more of the warm yellow. And notice I'm just mixing it right in with my other colors. All right, that's color harmony. Now let's see what we've got. So I'm trying to match this color right in here, and I think that's pretty good. All right, and it's different enough from the rest of the colors that it'll stand out. So I'm going to go ahead and paint in those areas which are around and behind the ones that we've just painted. So this is really fussy. Tip of your brush. I did not say this was going to be easy. Remember, I have to move my paper sometimes. Always looking at my reference image. It does go up and around these petals. Whoop. Right up to that first area. Okay, and then it comes down underneath. So one thing you're going to notice about this is when Mackintosh did this, he was really drawing. He was drawing with a paintbrush and filling things in. He drew with his pencil and then he drew with his paintbrush. These are very fine little areas. Okay, now between these two flowers, there's some green in there too. So we want to make sure we put those in. And there's a stem in between, but we'll do that next because it's a little bit of a different color. Okay, and then this one here. Okay. And then we're just going to add a little bit of our burnt sienna to the color that we have, just to gray it out a little bit. So let me show you that. So I just put a little bit of burnt sienna in to green it out a little bit, and just to make sure there's plenty of water in there so it's nice and pale. Okay, so that color, something like that. So just a little bit of burnt sienna and some water. And then we'll paint in those stems that we see. I probably painted the wrong one there, but that's okay. There we go. And then there's just a tiny bit down here, just to differentiate that a little bit. All right, so pretty good. I think we've got all of our green in, believe it or not, our base layer of green. Now, you might notice that when we're doing this, we've got, you know, I'm still suffering a little bit from shaky hands, so I'm not painting as crisply as I'm used to, but you might be. If not, when we're doing the finishing details on this part, actually the whole thing, we're going to be using a pencil again, all right, to put in some of those final details like he did. Like these really tiny little lines, right? These teeny tiny little lines that he put in, and then the dark line on the side. Those are all pencil lines. All right, so I think we're done there. Now, there's this little bit up on top here that goes back to our bluish green, and we can just kind of mix in the green that we just made with the other color. And we're just gonna put some feathery strokes up here, just like we see in the reference. So the tip of our brush gives us some feathery strokes. And then I can pull that down and go right up to that little shape. Sort of paint in that area. There. Okay. My paint flows down, so sometimes I've got to pick it back up and fuss with it a little bit. Okay. All right. So that's that part. So the next color we're going to work on is that beautiful cornflower blue. Okay, so let's mix that color. That's kind of a tricky color. All right. So I'm going to put this down here. Actually flip it this way so you can see the top part of my paper. And we're going to mix this cornflower blue color. All right. And then we're going to put in some pencil marks. So let's try to make that. And what I want to do is I want to start with my warm blue, okay? And then I'm going to add in some cool blue. Just a little bit. And then I'm going to add in just a touch of cool red. Okay, and that should give me a color that's sort of like cornflower blue. Right? I want to make sure it's brilliant enough. So I'm going to put in a little bit more of each, a little bit more cool red. That is like a cornflower blue. If I put more water into it, it becomes lighter. Now what happens if I put a little gouache into it? Just take a little bit of my gouache on the tip of my brush and mix it into part of it. Okay? So that's what we're going to use for this. We're going to take a little bit of gouache and mix it in to this cornflower blue, and we'll get this really light, bright blue. All right? So before we start painting this area, we want to go ahead and put some pencil marks in. And I'm going to be using an HB pencil. Turn this back around. And let's take a look here. So in this flower, we've got a bunch of little lines that are light, okay, and we've got these sort of purplish anthers, right? I think that's what they're called, anthers. So what I want to do is from each anther that I drew, I want to take a line. Oh, we forgot to paint that green. I'm going to pull down pencil lines. Okay, like this, just to make these little areas, okay? And we don't necessarily have to paint within them, but we want to keep them in mind. And then some come out this way. So these are just tiny little pencil lines that suggest the movement of this flower. I started by drawing directly from those little anthers that we see, and then drawing down to this area here. All right. Now, before we go any further, I did forget that. So I'm just gonna take some green paint that I still have on my palette. And I'm gonna paint this area in, which will definitely have a glaze on it later. So when I do this, I drew it in, and I want to paint each section separately that I drew in, just like you see it here. Leaving a tiny bit of white in between them. I switched brushes. It doesn't matter. So I'm just leaving a little bit of white in between. And then joining it down into the stem. It disappears at the edge here. Okay. We want to make sure we do that. Okay, so now that we've got the pencil marks in, we're going to look at the next flower. So we're going to just take care of all of those right now. So this flower has the same kind of thing, right? It's got all these little pencil lines that we didn't draw in when we were doing our tracing, because that can get really muddy. So what we want to do now is the center is sort of a amalgamation of just colors and shapes. So we want to focus on the outside, and we just want to take our pencil, Oh, there we go. And we just want to make these teeny little lines, right? Kind of how we see them. It doesn't have to be exact. We were trying to get this shape of teeny little lines coming in and out. And they each come to a point. And I'm just moving around this flower. Trying to stay in the direction that I see them. So take your time with this. Right? These pencil lines will sort of show through. They get kind of dark. They kind of disappear over here. But I still see a jagged edge, so I'm going to go ahead and just mark jagged edges. And then pick up again where I see them. Okay. And there's like a little line like this, and there's one that comes here. It's kind of just crazy inside. Then I'm going to take my kneaded eraser, and I'm just going to lighten up the center. Okay, so just sort of scrub out a little bit of the pencil from the center so it just sort of vaguely disappears. Does that make sense? All right, and then moving down, we have the same thing here. Okay, we've got these little tiny dots up here, so we're going to draw them. Just a few here and there. And then each one of them is going to have two lines that comes from it. Okay. That all meet sort of down in the same area. Be careful that you look at the direction that they go in, because they do bend. All right, this is part of paying attention at this level. There. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to take my kneaded eraser and go in and just lighten it up a little bit as it comes down there. Okay? So let's keep moving. Here we're fine. These don't need anything for now. Like this here, these kind of details with these little jagged edges, we're gonna put in at another time, all right? But let's move down to this daffodil. We've got the same thing happening, all right? We've got this center circle, all right? And then we've got these tiny little circles all around the edge. We don't have to be exact, but we want to make sure that we take the time to put some in. And it's just how he chose to depict that frilly edge. All right? Daffodils don't really have that kind of thing happening. If these are daffodils, I'm assuming they are. I don't know that kind of flower otherwise. So I'm just going to call it a daffodil. But regardless of what it is, this is how he chose to show the edge of this flower. And so we can go around and we can put some of these tiny little circles. Around. All right. And then I can divide it and just put like one here. Just kind of look at the direction of these lines and just fill a few in here and there. And then I can go in between and fill in a few more. Staying within the same shape that I've created. These are not hard pencil lines, they're very soft. But you can see that if you did this during your tracing, it would come off harsh. And we want these really fine, delicate lines. Okay, that's that one. And we're gonna do the same thing to this one. This one here. So we're gonna go ahead and, you know what, I'm gonna turn off the camera to do this one just to save a little time. So in this one, he separated this center part into 2 circles or ovals. Then I'm going to put in my my directional lines. Following the directions that I see. And then I can go back in and add some more to make sure they all sort of follow the right lines. And we're going to be painting over this, and that will soften that graphite and make it not so apparent. And I happen to love this particular drawing of Mackintosh because he uses the graphite and it's so soft. If it's his pen and ink, boy, he had a master touch. Okay, so these here, the stamens, we just want to make sure that those each go just some lines that kind of go down to the right places. The lilies are fine. These are fine. These are fine. This one we're going to have to do, okay? And the cornflower. So let's do the cornflower. So we've got some that we traced, okay? And we can go ahead and go over those just to sort of see how they're made. They're not hard to draw, okay? So let's just trace over the ones that we transferred. Make sure they're nice and crisp. Some go behind these other elements. There's our lily, so we don't have any there. There was one behind here that we can barely see. There's this one. So they're kind of this fun little shape, right? So what we're going to do now is kind of go in between each one and make similar shapes. Just go around, and you don't even have to do exactly what's on there. And if it goes behind another shape, you just pick up your pencil, all right? And you can turn it. And just put a few in here and there. We don't have to make it as busy as what he has here, okay? But as long as it goes all the way around, like in here, we'd fill in a little bit like there. As long as it gives the idea, all right? So just add in a few of those, all right, to make that more realistic. And then we've got this little edge that sticks out here and there. And then from the center part, we've got shapes kind of go like this. So we're just kind of filling in the edge around. So it has more of a lightness to here. Now this one is probably the hardest one simply because the lines are long. And if you notice, all of the lines meet back down to this spot here. So I can come up here and I can snug that up, and I can bring it all the way down, right? And this one, bring it all the way down, and this one. So we're starting with these. Bring it all the way down. Let it disappear behind one if it needs to. All right, I'm starting with what I have here. This could turn into 2. Okay. Here's one that came over on this side. There's one here. I'm just making these up, bringing them down. See, there's one here. If it disappears behind something, then you just let it disappear. See how I'm doing that? And then maybe we have one here that's in front, kind of. Make it a little bit darker than the other ones. You see how some of these are in the front and curling. Make it a little bit darker than the other ones so it looks like it's on top. Okay. And then just keep filling in. If you've ever done Zentangle, this is very similar to a Zentangle called Hollybaugh, where you make lines and you just, if a line goes behind another line, you just pick up your pencil and move to the next place. And I think I'll put in one right here that sort of goes that way. So the ones that are darker, and then I think I need one like here. There. And then we can just sort of snug this up down here too. So we've got a piece that goes here, then here, then here. You see, we're going to do the same thing we did before when we paint this in, and we'll just paint each separate little doodad, little petal on its own. And we forgot that stem, but that's purple, so we're going to do that later. And while we're at it, just define that a little bit. There's a leaf there that we forgot to. We can paint that in. See, it's tricky. So we can emphasize that. And then this leaf here sort of comes this way. There. All right, I think that's all the drawing that we need to do for now. These things, you know, will happen like this, will happen when we do details. All right, so now we're ready to paint the blue parts. So I'm gonna wake up that little pale blue that I mixed up with cool blue, warm blue, a tiny bit of cool red, all right, and some gouache. So you're gonna just use this lightest blue that's sort of opaque because we've added gouache to it. And I'm gonna look here and I'm just gonna paint in using the tip of my brush, okay, avoiding those sepals. But even if you paint over them, it's okay because they're dark and they'll go right over it. So I'm just following the direction that I put in and doing these tiny little lines with the tip of my brush. Just to sort of suggest that lighter area. And we'll go in with darker area later. Okay, love that. All right, pick up some more. And we'll come down here to this flower. And if you notice, a lot of it is just pencil, but we're gonna still use the tip of our brush to fill in some of those little petals that we put in. And I'm following the direction of form. Sometimes it comes in, moves around. You can just slap some blue here in the center the way you want to, because we'll add more later. But mostly we're just using the tip of our brush to emphasize the shape of this flower. I think that's pretty good. I don't want to do too much over here because we're going to use some white gouache with just a touch of blue in it. So if I even put more white gouache, we can put some in there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some of the brighter blue that I mixed without gouache in it and just drop in a little bit here and there. To put some of that color in. Okay. And then I can go in and just soften just a teeny bit. We're going to use white gouache on top, so a lot of that softening will happen later, just to give it some of that watery effect. All right, now we're going to move to this one. Same thing. I'm going to add even more white gouache. Okay, so let me show you. I'm adding even more white gouache, so it's really, really pale. All right, if I put a swatch down here, it's very, very pale. All right, so I'm adding even more white gouache, and I'm just going to go into this flower. And I'm going to go ahead and just pull a few strands here and there in those little areas that we painted, that we drew, sorry. Not everywhere, okay, but when I start one, I want to follow it through. Just a few here and there. It's very light. And then I'm going to grab more of just the blue, the cornflower blue without the gouache. And I'm just going to put a few marks of that in here every now and then where I see it. A little bit darker on some of these. Notice that he doesn't necessarily always stay in the lines in these, but there is, it's logical, right? He's not just like starting one and then not following it through. Each one of these is connected to the flower. Okay, so we're putting this down so we have a map, all right? Now, we're gonna paint these. And we're going to paint this little part on top of this lily here because it is that sort of cornflower blue color with a little bit of lavender on top, which we'll wash later. Okay, so now we're going to paint in these. And if you notice, pay very close attention. There's light and dark, okay? We're not going to paint the, those are left white mostly, so we're not going to paint the little circles. We're going to paint the part that's next to the stem. So this part, and we're going to use our cornflower blue without the gouache. Okay, and some of these, are darker than others, but that will take place in the later layers. But I'm still painting each of these separately, okay? And I'm trying to pay attention to where they are. And up here, like this one's very light, and then, you know, we can always add gouache on top of that. I'm following my drawing, but I'm also following the reference. And notice how I'm holding my brush at the very tip, because that just gives me more control. More paint. Sometimes my drawing is a little different than the reference, but I'll just fudge it, right? Huh, what is that? I can't see it. Well, we're gonna fudge it. Seems like it had two there. Yeah, I definitely did not do a good job on the reference here. I'm just trying to get those little blue areas painted in. Trying not to go over the lily there. Okay, I think that's pretty good. And again, we're probably going to go over this with white gouache. I'm imagining that's what's going to happen as I'm looking at it. So when we're doing projects like this, you're actually seeing my process. Like if I were going to do this, this is how I would approach it. So I hope you learn from that too when I make decisions on the fly. All right, I think that's good. All right. Yeah. Okay, so let's go ahead and paint the mauve colors, all right? So now we're gonna mix up this kind of pale mauve-y color, which is not an easy color to mix. So I'm gonna start by clearing off a bit of my palette. And I'm just gonna wet it. And wipe it off. And it doesn't need to be totally clean because some of those colors can mix in with it, and that's fine. Now let's think about that color. We're gonna start with a cool red, the same one we've been using. And I'm gonna make quite a bit of it. We're not gonna do the darker color yet, just that lighter color. So what is the opposite of Cool Red. It's going to be sort of a greenish color. So I'm going to take some of my, just a little touch of my ultramarine to make a violet. And I'm going to put some warm yellow in, and let's see what happens. A little bit more. Okay, I still think that's too violet, so I'm going to put in a touch more of my Cool Red. And then a little bit more of my warm yellow. Let's see where I am with that. So you can always rewind and watch that again to see. So here is the color that I ended up with, and this is the color. I think that's pretty good, right? We're just going to add a little bit of water to it. All right, so we started with Cool Red, and we added a little bit of ultramarine to make a violet, and then we added warm yellow, and then a little bit more Cool Red, and a little bit more warm yellow. And I'm going to put just a little bit more water into my mix. All right, so I've got a lighter version. That's just about perfect. So you're going to have to practice that mix until you get it right. And we'll go ahead and start up here because I see that color behind on this. All right, not on this top part here, but on these petals next to it. I'm going to paint each one of those petals separately. My paintbrush is a little too wet. Okay. Just putting that color in. Remember, this is our lightest area to make a map for ourselves, painting each petal separately. Okay, and it goes out over here. Make sure I don't have any pooling paint. And then there's just a little bit of it up here, so I'm just gonna just dab that in for now. Okay. Okay, so moving down, I'm gonna go ahead and paint these lily shapes. These are closed lilies hanging from those stems. And they're fairly dark except for certain areas, but those lighter areas are this color. So by putting this transparent layer on, being careful around my pencil lines there, I can paint over this later with the other colors that I need, and I'm also not hiding those pencil marks that are so important. Okay, and I'll do the same thing for this one. I'm painting it in the direction that it grows. Being careful around those other areas there. Okay, and then the darker areas will come later. Always mindful to not be smudging my graphite in other areas. And because I'm on an easel, I have to smooth things a little bit. Okay, now we're going to go down and paint the next one, which is this one here, and it's got a little bit of violet in there, so I'm going to leave that. Should have painted that with the cornflower. I'm seeing things that we missed, right? It's a complicated image. Comes down to here where it meets that other flower that we haven't painted yet. Okay. All right, now I'm going to paint the big one. And I'm going to move myself this way for this petal, but I'm going to turn my reference image. I want to be sure that I'm getting it right. Then I can turn it back. Okay. And then this one. I told you guys these videos were going to be longer. But we really want to finish this part in one fell swoop. You can break it up a little bit, do it color by color if you want to. And then this next one, and be careful to keep those petals separate. Okay, and then this one, looking at my reference image, so it ends here, there's a white behind it, the color of the paper. I'm trying to keep those petals separate, but not with a huge space in between them. And one more comes above here. And then underneath. Okay, and this part here is sort of this color, so I'm going to go ahead and paint that this color, and then we'll fill in that lavender when we have that color going. Okay, and then we're going to go ahead and paint these, a couple of these. So I'm going to go ahead and paint this one coming down, and then I'm going to go ahead and paint these in because some of them are darker, but I'm going to go ahead and map them in now with this lighter color because I don't want to lose those lines. Some of them are white or gray. Okay. All right, then moving along, we're going to go ahead and do the cornflower. So again, lots of paint on your brush. I'm going to move this down a little bit. And we're just going to be very careful, right? And paint each petal that we've put in. And some sort of go behind, so we'll just paint those in that color. Be careful you stop where it goes behind another leaf or something. That's my lily, but I might have a little bit coming in here. I just want to make sure that I'm not disturbing that lily. And remember, we will redefine with pencil later. I'm going to turn this. Using the tip of my brush. Okay, just keep moving it. So I get all of those little bits painted in, all of those petals that we drew. I think that's all of them. All right, I'll turn it back around now. Okay, let's see. Now we'll go ahead and paint some of these in, and they might get darker later, but we're still going to paint in this area with this color. Little. And there's some darker purple that's going to happen. Just be careful when you get next to that lily. Okay. Now we're going to go ahead and make a little bit more of a violet color. So I'm going to add in a little bit, ooh, a lot of ultramarine blue and a little bit of cool red, so I get a violet. All right, and then I'm going to soften that violet with just a little bit of warm yellow. Okay, and so it's just a purple like this, and I'm going to go over my I see a little purple here, so we're going to put that in. We almost have every color except for maybe orange present here. Well, that's messy. Okay. Just looking around. Definitely need to make a little bit more green. We missed a few things. I missed a few things, you didn't. Okay, and then I've got purple here on the stem. And so I'm going to go ahead and paint this in. even though it's going to change a little bit. Ooh, that's a wet brush. Darn it. Violet, and then inside here, it's a little bit violet. And then I'm just going to pull this into the green here where I see it's a little bit of a different color. There. Okay. And I'm going to take a little bit of this violet and just put it in right here in short little strokes just to remind me that I've got that happening. And it sort of gets darker all the way in behind my lily, so I'll add that. And I'm also going to take a little bit of this violet, even though this color is a little bit different. And I'm going to paint these in so I don't lose them. Just paint a few in here, and those can change. They'll get darker. And you may have lost those lines as you go, but just add some of those tiny little marks in so you know. Okay. And now we're going to go back to that pale pink that we made, the mauve color. And paint in these. And those will get some darker areas too, but right now we're just trying to make our map. Okay. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that we need to do with that. No. Okay, so from there, we're going to make a brown. We're just going to take some burnt sienna and mix it in on our palette where you have some blue or violet or something, and we're just making a brown that has a little bit of all these other colors in it, right? By just putting burnt sienna in there, we're making a brown with these other colors. Just sort of, it's sort of a mauve brown, but just keep adding it. And that's good enough for our first layer. And we're going to paint in each section right here, okay, on this bottom of this thistle. So each section is going to get painted separately. Leaving a tiny little bit of space. It's so small, but you're leaving just the littlest bit of space in between to show that definition. I gotta get another silver brush in size 6. This is a Winsor Newton Series 7, and while they're supposed to be such good brushes, I swear the point frays, it doesn't snap back. It's just not my favorite, but my silver brush size 8 is just too big for this. Okay, and it even continues below. So we're going to make sure that we get those painted in too. Okay. Now, we're going to go ahead and mix up some green again. Let me just wipe my palette off. And what I truly mean, I just wipe it off with a tissue. All right, so you don't need to worry about being too crazy with that. Now let's go back to our green mix, which was a little bit of cool blue, okay, with burnt sienna to make that sort of silvery gray blue, and then a little bit of, oh, that was a little too much. So when that happens, I just go back to my original colors and add them in. So burnt sienna and cool blue until I get that green or close to it. Nope, that's not close. So I'll keep adding. Better. A little more of this. Okay, and then we need lots of water in there. So just in part of it, I'll put extra water, right? Okay. So there's a couple places that I noticed that I missed green. One of them is in here. Right in here. This tiny little thing right here, easy to miss in such a busy composition. All right, and then over here, we've got some green leaves, and so I'm just gonna put those in for now to make our map. Oh. Okay, is there anything else? I thought I missed one other one. This one. Take a little green here and just plop it in. This zigzaggy lightning bolt leaf that comes there. That's good. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and do the yellow. So for that, I really want to clean my plate. You could even get a new plate, but I'm going to start by just wiping it off. And then I'll spritz it with a little water and then wipe it again. So I have a good area of the plate that's very clean. So right there in the middle. Okay, and now I'm going to get some yellow on my brush. So this yellow, remember, we were going to mix, I'm going to mix a little bit of each yellow. Mostly, we're going to start with our lemon yellow, put that in the middle of the plate. And this yellow has an opacity to it, okay, in the painting. So I'm going to get plenty of yellow on my plate. This is our lemon yellow. And I'm going to need a little more gouache because my gouache got blue and I don't want any of that blue to go in there. So I'm just putting a little bit more gouache on my plate. And I'm going to mix a tiny bit of that into this lemon yellow, and it's going to make a milky lemon yellow. Okay, I can add a little bit more. Okay, so that's going to look like this. All right. Now, there's only a couple places where I see that yellow, and one of them is here. And I'm just going to paint a little bit of that on there. All right, a little bit on this edge of the petal. Okay, a little bit coming down here and here, a little bit right here. And remember, we're going to go over these with white gouache, so they're going to be blended in later. And then there's a little bit right in here. Okay, and then up here in this, I just want to run some through. Some of the very tops of these. All right, just to get a little yellow on there. Now I'm going to go ahead and add in some of my warm yellow to warm this up a little bit. So I'm going to take a little bit of warm yellow and add it in, and it's going to become a much, just a little bit to make it a warmer yellow, but it's still opaque. All right. Now I'm going to go ahead and paint the insides of these flowers, and I'm using little strokes toward the center. Okay, and it's all going to look very uniform at first, but this is just our first layer. Notice that I'm not necessarily painting over those pencil lines. I kind of want to keep those separate. And I'll come down here and do the same. And I'm going in the same direction as my pencil lines. All right. I get lazy and I don't lift the paper up. Okay. Then I'm going to go right back into here, and I'm going to add just a tiny bit, tiny bit of ultramarine. Actually, let's do that on the side. I'm going to take a tiny bit of ultramarine on the side, okay, and add some cool red to it. So it's like a violet color. And I had yellow on my brush. That's going to look a little gray, but that's okay because we've got plenty of that cool red in there. Wipe my brush off. Just grab a tiny bit of that and add it to our yellow. So it's going to mute it out. It's going to mute it out a little bit. So that color, it's about like this. It's sort of a mustardy yellow. And now I'm going to go in and I'm going to add a little bit of a layer of this. Let me put more water in that. My brush is too dry. Every now and then, I'm going to add some of this color where I see it, just to add a little bit of dimension and diversity. Okay, and with this color, I can kind of move out to the pencil lines a little bit. Again, I'm using the tip of my brush. Okay, and the same thing on this one. And you're going to notice that there's some white areas too, but we're going to take care of that next. Right now I'm just kind of going out to the pencil lines with this more muted yellow and then pulling it through so I don't see so much of that bright yellow. I still want to see some of it, but I want to see some of that muted yellow too. Okay, and now I'm just going to take straight white gouache on my brush. And I'm just going to pull through a few areas of the white gouache where I see it lighter. Now, you're going to notice that white gouache, when you put it over other paints for the first layer, it's going to disappear a little bit. all right? And that's why when we come back at a later time and we start adding more layers to this painting, we'll add more white gouache all over to this painting. But for now, that just gives us a base to start with, okay? It's amazing how much white gouache disappears. Just so you can kind of see how this works. If I come over here, it's going to be the same thing. See, we're going to be painting over this with white gouache. But because that yellow is underneath, it's going to give us a beautiful effect, I think. Okay, we're also going to use some of the muted and all of that. Yeah, that's looking good. So the only thing that is not painted over are the white areas of our lilies and our daffodils. Now, we could go in because it's graphite and we might want to just reserve it. Okay, so let's wipe our, I want to do one more thing. Let's wipe our plate off. I just really want to have a map down. Okay. Take what's left of your white gouache, put it in the middle. Take a little bit of the white gouache that had the blue on it if you want, put it in the middle. Grab just a little bit of whatever's on your palette and stick it in there. What I want is I want a white that's milky, okay, but not totally white. So again, I'm just grabbing here and there. Now let me see, that's better. I don't know if you can see that. See how it's not white and it's not blue, it's just sort of a soft white. So try to get a color as close to that as possible. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna paint, for instance, our lily. Just to give it a little coat of something. So we're reserving those pencil lines, all right? Down in here too. And the thing is that we're not doing the toned paper. That's just a, I just think that's a whole nother thing. This is tricky enough for our first project, so. But you can see that I'm just adding a little layer of this gouache. It's getting a little bit too dark. To our lilies. Because I'm starting to lose my pencil lines and we don't want to do that, okay? We can always add some of them back if we lose them, but we really don't want to lose them. And it also gives them a little bit of presence, not just the white paper with the pencil lines. But at least now our pencil lines will be more secure. And the petals will be a little bit different than the white paper. All right, I'm gonna do the same thing to the daffodil petals right over what we did. I'm just painting the whole petal with this really sheer layer of gouache. And this is just going to reserve our pencil lines and our petals for our next step. Which on these petals is very gouache heavy, so So we're good. A little bit on that one. Okay, just a few more. It's hardly perceptible, but it is securing that pencil and differentiating the petals from the white paper. Over here we've got one more. And then I'm going to pull a little bit of that milky gouache through here. I'm also going to pull it through here. Okay, that way we're not losing those lovely pencil marks that we made. And we are going to be putting gouache on this flower. Okay. So anywhere where we've made these nice, delicate lines, I'm putting in some of this milky gouache. So it's not just white gouache, but we added in just a tiny bit of our palette colors. I mean, almost imperceptible, right? And plenty of water, so it's transparent enough. It's not hiding our pencil lines, but it is securing them. Then we've got this lovely little white area here. I'll just add that right over the top. And I think I already did this one. I just want to make sure. Okay. And then inside these is going to be our last bit. So take whatever of the gouache you have left and just secure these little areas here, which are mostly graphite. There. Now, did Mackintosh do this? We have no way of knowing. But we're trying to use our skills as we understand them to mimic what he did. And I think that's an important part. I'm also going to put a little bit on this just to differentiate that from the white paper. There. Okay. Whew, that's a lot of work, isn't it? So our first layer is done. We made a map, all right? We've got almost probably all of the surfaces covered with some kind of paint or thin milky layer of gouache. All right, this will make our job much easier when we come back next time. All right, and the next time we're going to start adding in all those details and darknesses and glazes and things like that. It will be just as long, but it won't be as scary because we've got a map down, right? All right, take your time. The next video won't be for another week and a half to 2 weeks. There's 2 videos like this a month. All right, so the next video is going to be putting all of our details on. all right, all the rest of our color glazes and things like that, and putting in our final pencil lines. All right, everybody, if you have any questions, just let me know, all right? It's a lot. I told you it wasn't going to be easy, but do your best and try. And this is don't forget that this is a learning experiment, right? This is a learning process, all right? And if you like it and you like working this way, then what you can do is you can draw your own flower bouquet and try these techniques out. And each time you do it, you'll get better and better at it. All right? So if you get this far, you've done a really great job. All right, everybody, thank you so much. And I will see you again for this project in like a week and a half. Take care.